The myth of the alpha male was the speech that I gave in October of 2014 in Tampa, Florida at the 21 convention. So why I gave the speech, The Myth of the Alpha Male? There's a ton of reasons why I gave the speech, The Myth of the Alpha Male, and it's just really such a loaded topic, as we've seen from the different comments and so on. But I think the most important reason that inspired me was being a men's coach for so many years and seeing what worked with men, what the problems that they ran into, and the different ideas and mindsets that went along with the absolute growth of attaining personal excellence, which is every single one of our goals. Was that the idea of being alpha, being the best, being somebody that was always on top, being an absolute leader in life, actually led to never being any of those things. And that when we looked at excellence, when we looked at men who achieved their absolute definition of self in whatever way, that could be entrepreneurship, it could be athleticism, it could be dating, or whatever parts of your life, and hopefully it's a well-rounded expression of all those things, was that it was never singularly about these different traits we assign to being alpha. The dominance, the winning, the being the best, fuck the rest. We see this over and over again, and men really, diving into this mindset. But it was actually that if I was to win, if I was to be the best, if I was to be a leader, I also needed to learn how to be humble. I also needed to learn how to, connect with myself, to lose, to know how to deal with failure. And it's almost as if, and it absolutely is as if, that this idea of being alpha has given men this false awareness of what it means to be a man, that you could never admit fault, you could never admit weakness, you could never, back down from something or be humble in certain situations. And man, when you can't do that, you live a life of fear and detachment, unwilling to be yourself, and, afraid to put yourself out there in the world. So one thing that happens with men's development, especially in the dating world, but you see this in the health and fitness world as well, or just in the overall self-help for men, is that the idea of the alpha male is equated to a certain animal species or their biology. Now, of course, human beings are animals, but we are our own species, and we need to really study that thoroughly in all its different dimensions, which is hard because it gets really complex. But in much of the animal kingdom, what makes somebody alpha, or what makes that animal alpha, is literally his size and his strength. That he is bigger and stronger, and because of that, he then dominates, he leads, he has all the women, and so on. And these aren't traits that he learned, to be the leader or to learn how to be dominant and assert himself. It literally was dependent upon his size and his strength, or moving into that role of being the strongest or the biggest of the group. And it's funny because in the dating world, we talk about replicating this, and that when we do this because, gorillas do it or silverbacks do it, that we could do it and that we could show our territory as men, and then women will be more attracted to us. Whereas in that world of gorillas or the many other different, animals that have this alpha male trait, it isn't about choice. It isn't about women being attracted to us. It's about taking. It is about being dominant and enforcing. These would be things like totalitarianism, rape, or these different other social phenomenons that just, you could not do as a human being. Now, that being said, when we look at humanity and actually study that, we can learn about the different roles of how men can get the highest amount of leverage with their social and sexual lives, or the best bodies, and so on. And it's actually a much, much different story than what we see in some of the animal species that we nitpick to make our points. The interesting thing about dating in modern culture and how we choose our mates and how we have a great sex life is actually not based on a lot of the things that a lot of dating people say. You got to be bigger, you got to be stronger, you got to be alpha. All those things that we talked about as these biological traits, these hardwired things that people love. Well, what people are really, human beings are really hardwired for is this social connection. And so the interesting thing is that somebody could have a ton of traits. They could be socially more popular. They could have higher social value, all these different things that we say are super important, and they could be if they are important to you. We could be bigger, we could be stronger, we could be a leader, we could have a big group of, people following us and celebrity and so on. Yet at the same time, somebody who's introverted can still connect with somebody within the right situations, build intimate connections, find fulfillment, and have a great sex life. And the interesting thing is what the dating industry has proven over the past 15 years is that guys who just focus on that tough, I'm the best, screw you all, I'm on top of the world, actually do worse, get less results with women, sex partners, and different connections, and even fulfillment than guys who just take an average, normal approach of being able to have a conversation, fit within your own community, have dialogue, connect, and, be sexual. The warrior identity. So one of the most controversial parts of the speech is the warrior identity, and it's me saying that the warrior, the king, the alpha, the leader, the hero are all identities that are fairly new to human history, that they haven't been needed. In fact, they actually cause harm to us if we marry ourselves to them too much. Now, this pisses people off to such a high degree. You can see it in the comments of where people just resort to blame and immediate anger and wishing ill will upon you and so on. And also, when I gave the speech in 2014, a guy came up to me as soon as I got off the stage and was like, "You are wrong. There have always been warriors in human history, and you need to do your research," and so on. And it really affected him in a big way. So this brings up two things. Number one is the history of human culture and how these identities came about and how possibly we didn't need them and why we are so attached to them now. And the second thing is why does this make men so angry to perhaps have somebody question this culture or question this idea of being alpha to the point where it puts you in this dramatic rage? Human history and the warrior identity. So human history is massive, it's huge. For 300,000 years, we have been on Earth as Homo sapiens. And we've been evolving to that in a humanoid form for millions of years. Now, 10,000 years ago, there were enough people in one region on the planet to look up to one person and recognize him as a king or as a leader or have specific roles that came into play. It was a little bit later on down the line where we actually dedicated a specific identity to a warrior. Now, there was a comment on the Facebook chat, or I'm sorry, on the YouTube comments that actually said, well, what about the wall paintings that celebrated a kill? Why are you taking away this from men? They, were warriors and had this definition to be themselves. Of course, there were times where we had traits that, are what we would call a warrior, what we would call a king, what we would call a leader, but that was not that person's singular identity. And this is where the problem comes into play. That if we look at modern day tribal cultures, sure, if there's a tribe of 20, 50, and of course when it gets into over 100 people, specific roles become dedicated to a person. Yet the person's value of themselves, who they are, and who they are with their community, how they feel secure and with other people is so much less dependent upon that identity than how they interact with everybody and how they see themselves. Whereas in our culture, we have communicated our value, our self-worth, our essence of masculinity, of femininity, of who we are as a person on this cultural role, this cultural identity that is so far detached from interpersonal connection. Now, so this brings us to why this makes men so angry, or some men so angry, that perhaps they should question this idea of leadership or culture or alphaness. And to tell this story and to get to it, because I want to get to this awesome, beautiful solution to it all. After this speech, within my groups, we interviewed hundreds of men. Some of those men were super successful, 35, 45, they were successful in their business careers, maybe they had done something with a sport, but they had achieved a high level and an identity of who they were. Now we interviewed another group of men who were in their early 20s, 20 to 25, and some of those men, a subgroup, was actually really married to this idea of alphaness. And there was a lot of frustration, a lot of determination, a lot of push, and a need to do something. And it actually cultivated a high level of anxiety. Now, all of those men who were in that accomplished goal, 35, 45, and that had, hit an area of their life where they felt really comfortable, every single one of them knew what it meant to be dominant. When we asked them about being alpha, they knew they had an answer, what it meant to lead, what it meant to know what you want. But then when we also asked them, what did it mean to give up at times? What did it mean to sacrifice? What did it mean to surrender? What did it mean that period of your life where you lost everything and it may have been years? And they all talked about how valuable that was. And one of the most interesting things is nearly every single one of these men who had achieved that level of success said that in order for them to get there, they needed to let go of that identity that they were once chasing, to stop following the icon, to stop following the thing that was saying what they needed to be outside of themselves, and learn how to do it within themselves. That's what gave them the true virtues of masculinity, identity, and fulfillment of self. That is the true meaning behind the myth of the alpha male. It is not so you could get a bunch of information, be right, know human history and so on. That is all to empower the belief that you have everything that you have within you to live the greatest possible expression of yourself. And perhaps you could do it in a quicker way, a more efficient way than what culture might have already told you.